CJ here, and this is the Knowledge Catalog, another video. It's going to be about the social studies. Our topic for this video is going to be about the teaching of science, and I hope that you would be able to relate because this teaching of science that we're referring to is going to be the teaching of science in the Philippines. Okay, so if you are a student or if you are a science teacher, this is how it's supposed to be done. Well, at least based from the books, of course. So we are going to tackle specifically developing a science lesson and then the instructional resources and materials for science teaching. Okay, in this video, again, these are the two things we will be tackling. So the conceptual framework for science education in the Philippines is as follows. I know it's quite blurry, but basically you'll find this sa curriculum guide. The approaches include Constructivism, social cognition learning model, learning style model, brain-based learning, inquiry-based approach, problem-issue-based learning, science technology society approach, contextualized learning, which is the same thing, and then the multidisciplinary approach. So we begin with the Constructivism. Constructivism, students are assumed to be the authority on constructing their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. It is much like constructing meaning out of your experiences. That is how science teaching and science learning has to be done nowadays. In science education, the Dewey concept of learning by doing is applied by offering various activities to students in the introduction and extension of the lesson. You will fully relate to this if you have already seen one of our books in the public schools, yung kulay orange. You will see that there are so many activities in there, and then ang nangyayari actually is that na-outnumber nung activity part yung part for the discussion. Because sometimes the activity itself is already the lesson, or actually that is most of the time. For instance, in grade 10, Activity 3, which is head-on collision, is a required activity for the students' understanding of converging plate boundaries. Before they would be discussing convergence of plate boundaries, they will first have to experience working on something that is related to it, which is Activity 3, which is head-on collision. It offers some real-life and scaled-down experiences for the understanding of some huge concepts such as plates colliding. So the second one is social cognition learning. This is the second approach, or strategy. Social cognition learning model had Albert Bandura as its major proponent. And it is the idea that we learn from our interactions with others and that we observe their behaviors and assimilate them, usually the positive ones, into our own. So think about model learning in Albert Bandura as one of the key indicators of competence among teachers through the results-based performance management system, or RPMS. Managing the classroom structure to engage learners individually or in groups for meaningful explorations through hands-on activities. Students are encouraged to interact and communicate their ideas with their peers and with the facilitator. If you are not familiar yet with the RPMS, this is how performance among teachers in public schools is managed or is measured. So every year they have this evaluation through the RPMS, and one of the things that they're supposed to do is exactly doing or promoting social cognition learning by organizing students into groups, and then they're going to work collaboratively. The next approach is the next consideration is learning style. So we have here 3 learning styles discussed: visual, kinesthetic, and auditory, which are pretty much something you already know. The learning style model had its proponent as Howard Gardner, and it gives regard to the habitual manner in which students gain and process knowledge. So basically, yung pinaka-concern nito is how students access knowledge, how students process information. Primarily, we have 3 ways, which is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Learners can either be visual, any of the 3, which are learning styles dominated by seeing, hearing, and interacting physically, respectively. On matters of differentiated instruction, this is actually employed. This pedagogy, DI, allows the exhibit of various talents and habits of mind that students have to create their own outputs after an instruction is specifically crafted for their kind of learning. Differentiated instruction is a pedagogy. It is a strategy a teacher may employ in teaching, say in this case, science. In differentiated instruction, ang gagawin is that yung mismong instruction or the manner in which the lesson is going to be taught is crafted for visual learners. Say there will be a lot of visual activities, moments, opportunities for students to explore things visually, and then the students are also going to express their learning in terms of visual manners or in terms of visual opportunities. Same goes for auditory. Yung learning nila is going to be auditory, their expression of their learning is also going to be auditory, and then lastly, kinesthetic. Ayan, so the next one is going to be brain-based learning, and it is a very young approach towards science teaching. Brain-based learning is a research-based understanding of how the mind works, its habits, and manners of acquiring new information. So, ang utak natin kasi, it already has something in it, like a particular habit or a particular sequence of, doing things, steps that the brain is taking in order for it to understand or gain its own information. Yun, meron kasing mga tricks din na pwedeng gawin, di ba, to make your brain do a particular thing, and brain-based learning is exactly doing that same thing, doing those tricks. This biological approach puts into consideration the natural way in which the brain operates, and it maximizes its potential through various techniques. So it also involves both conscious and some unconscious processes. Halimbawa, baka natin dito. So, yung mga halimbawa, talking. Giving students tidbits of information and allowing them to discuss what they have already learned, that is one brain-based approach. This can be both conscious and unconscious because the students need to do something consciously while their brains are going to be practiced unconsciously. The second one is emotion. So setting the learning environment to setting the environment positively, because only so will allow the brains to be ready to learn. If it's a threatening environment, if it's always a daunting environment, if it's like they are stepping on numbers, if halimbawa yung sinasabi nila sa Kapampangan na if tutuklo lang numero ring like they're always in a constant danger of failing and of being intimidated or humiliated, chances are they are not really going to learn anything new. That is in case of the new students that we have right now in the 21st century. Next one is through visuals, to stimulate their minds through images and through charts. And so the mind also learns through visuals. Chunking naman is giving a chunk of information and allowing them to process it in some way and limit what is going to be taught. So just give them something to study or to think about and then just let their brains do all of the work. That is chunking. Movement. You can allow students to move. Halimbawa, if they've been so used to having the particular kind of seating arrangement, how about you switch it up a bit? Yun. So that is movement. Shake it up, do something different for the day. Halimbawa, there can be like something like Taco Tuesday, yung mga ganon. Pwede kayong gumawa ng ganitong klaseng activity or trend. Halimbawa, every Monday, they will be having a mind setting. So everything that they will be doing for the week, you will be informing them, and then they will be putting those schedule on their notepads. Second naman is Tuesday. Pwede rin naman gawin is perhaps something like a trending news. You can discuss it in the class. Pwede yun. For Wednesdays naman, what they can do is they can be given a particular quote, and that they can think about that quote and get their and express how they understood it. So it's like Wisdom Wednesday. And then the next one, it can be like every Thursday, pwede silang magbasa ng ilang chapters sa isang book, and that can be a very peaceful activity because they're just reading it. It can be tranquil Thursday, and then for Friday naman, they can clean up. So that is a fresh Friday. Actually, that is something that I got from my previous school, which is Brightwood's school. Ganun yung ginagawa namin nung isang school year na nandun ako. And so, next one is the brain needs oxygen. So, you have to allow students to stretch, to stand, or have a quick brain break through conversations. Or you can also give them some brain gym exercises like matching and all of those kinds of sort of things. Okay, kinds and sorts of things. Next is by making connections. So you can relate the lesson with the story or the previous lessons, so their brains are going to be better. They're going to be able to process the new information. Try thinking of the word assimilation. Ayun. Feedback. You can provide them with motivation and chances to review their progress. Ako, what I do for feedback is I am keeping an index card near me with their names, and then I'm going to record some really important events like a very good answer. Ganun, I'll be giving them faction points. That's how I call them, faction points. Next is music. You can also play appropriate music for some quiet time, like while they're working on something. A very quiet music lang siguro may suffice kasi hindi naman pwedeng pop music siya na masyadong disturbing. In that way, baka ma-distract lang yung bata. Also, some fun acronyms. You can also use that because some acronyms are, they will allow the student to remember something easily. Ano kasi yun? Yung King Henry died, died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk. King Henry died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk. It's just like kilometer. It's like the acronym for, or it is a mnemonic. It may not be an acronym, but it's a mnemonic for remembering kilo, hecto, deca, unit, and then deci, centi, and milli. So that is a fun way of remembering things, especially yung mga may sequence, or especially yung mga merong relationship with each other. Next one, if the brain needs oxygen, the brain also needs hydration. So, kailangan i-remind yung mga bata that they need to drink water during learning time. Also, reflection. Metacognition ito, okay? Thinking about their learning. Give time to for students to think about the topic by the end of the lesson. Next is energy level. Take advantage of the time of the day, especially for elementary pupils. If it's early in the morning, you can give them high energy level activities. Okay, to teach the most important material, and then leave the low energy activities later kapag pagod na sila. Ayan. Next is space. They need to have adequate learning space. Hindi pwedeng cramped sila. Okay? Kailangan mabigyan sila ng adequate learning space na pwede silang makapag-move. Okay? Which is actually connected to movement. Location. You can vary the place where you stand when you're discussing a new lesson. Halimbawa ako, when I'm introducing a new lesson, I am going to be behind students and perhaps in the far right or far left. And when I am going through the lesson, I'm right in front of them, mostly. And then when we're about to finish, I will be in the middle of the classroom because that is the moment when they are just reflecting on their learning with me. Next is choice. So students love to have choices. Okay, offer some of them. Pwedeng sit or stand, where to sit, or the order of the day's agenda. I sometimes do this, especially if the day's agenda are quite flexible. So, pwede ko silang tanungin, ano yung gusto nilang unahin, and so they will be choosing something, and, perhaps they'll be attentive because, that is their choice. Next one is anticipation. Meron tayong mga graphic organizers, mga anticipation guides na pwede ibigay sa kanila. So we can tell the students to watch out for an information during a discussion and tell them that they have to retell the information to a fellow student, or you can just provide them, yung sinabi ko kanina, graphic organizer na pwede nilang i-fill up or fill in while you are discussing the lesson. And so some other brain-based strategies were presented in the pedagogical retooling in mathematics, languages, and science or primals across all regions in the country, including some things like scoreboard, kung saan may positive reinforcement mechanism through assigning of points, such as yung index card na ginagawa ko. Class yes, which is a stimulus and response through orally communicated words. Halimbawa, You can say the word class, and then the students are going to say yes. So notice that the response is the same intonation as the stimulus. Pwede rin class, class. Pwede rin yes, yes. Ganun. So, pwede mo rin siya gawing magalang ba? Yes po, ganun. It's just that you need to make sure that whenever the students seem to be flying away, you have to make sure that you have some mechanisms to get their attention back, or perhaps if they're not flying away yet, to maintain that attention. And hands and eyes, yung next one. Getting the attention of students by asking them to put their hands together and looking at you. I do this in a face-to-face class by asking them to hands and eyes. So, ibig sabihin nun, when I say hands and eyes, or when I raise my fist, that means I am asking them to do the same. Raise their fist, and that means they have to do it quickly, because if they're not going to do it quickly, that means they're not listening. Okay, so, ayun. Those are the things that you can do for brain-based learning. The next one is inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning starts with a question, and the levels of inquiry is based from where the question or questions are going to be coming from, then the procedure, and then the solution or results. So, ganito siya yan. The following are the types of inquiry level, or the levels of inquiry, and they're not really types. So, the first level is confirmatory inquiry or confirmation inquiry. Yung mga estudyante dito, mabibigyan sila ng question, bibigyan din sila actually ng procedure kung anong gagawin nila to answer that question, and they're also going to be given an expected solution or an answer. So that is just like they're just going to do the activity because they need to confirm the result that was already given to them. The answer was already given to them. Confirm na lang nila. Next one is structured inquiry. Ibibigay ng teacher yung question, magbibigay din siya ng procedure. Ang mga bata nun, they can have a wide array of different solutions. Okay, so that is structured inquiry. The next one is guided inquiry. The question is going to come from the teacher, and then ang mga bata ang bahala ng gagawa ng procedure nila, and thus they will also be coming up with their own solutions. And the last one is open inquiry, where students investigate questions that are student formulated through student designed and selected procedures. Think about a thesis, okay? Thinking of a problem, thinking of a question, okay? So, yun na yung open inquiry. Ganun na kataas yung inquiry level dyan. Ayan. So, that is for inquiry-based learning. The next one is problem-based learning. So, meanwhile, this kind of learning had its roots from IBL, but it won't finish as IBL. This one pioneered in medical and law schools in the past, and it has evolved to have expanded its utility to the secondary schools. Ang PBL starts with determining whether a problem exists and continues with phrasing the statement of the problem exactly. So think of thesis again. Okay? So it then continues to the identification of information, gathering of data, and learning goals, and creating a work plan. Think of a thesis. Okay, whenever you're discussing problem-based learning, think of a science investigatory project, think of a thesis, think of a research project. So this method requires thorough knowledge of the subject and a high degree problem-solving skills. It is usually used to higher disciplines, while IBL is usually used in lower disciplines, like, say, for instance, junior high school. It seeks to solve ill-structured problems. That is one of the things that problem-based learning would like to do. So, yeah. Science, technology, and society approach. I'm sorry I was not able to change this one right here. So, it is supposed to be science, technology, and society approach, or contextualized learning. It puts emphasis on how science and technology shapes students' values, beliefs, and other aspects of their modern culture, while on the other hand answering how the society's culture helps shape science and technology. So when we talk about STS, or science, technology, and society approach, you often think of contextualization of science. Like, say for instance, when we discuss plants sa mga bata, we use locally sourced plants or yung mga species na available sa locality, and thus pwedeng makita ng mga bata as they are going home from the school. Like, yeah, that is how close science must be to students. Also, we're also going to say, for instance, plants again. Okay, yung medicinal properties ng plants, hindi mo naman pwedeng pag-usapan yung medicinal properties ng plant na hindi naman alam ng mga bata. So, perhaps you can start with where they are coming from. If they have an oregano at their homes, you can ask them what kinds of medicinal plants do they have. They will be raising their hands, and then they'll be telling you oregano, and you have to talk about oregano because that is what they know. That kind of plant, that kind of medicinal plant is what they're familiar with. Again, so it seeks to start each lesson focusing on students' perspectives, their questions that were brought about by their experiences rather than some basic skills and processes. It gives science and technology education a context, a milieu with which it can begin. The next one is multidisciplinary approach. So how about this approach? In the face of fragmented school curriculum brought by habits of breaking down problems into its component parts, it is seen that we are having trouble in seeing the bigger picture. So multidisciplinary approach aims at cementing together fields to foster greater connections and ensure better retention of concepts. Science is quite, it's quite vast. What's good about it, though, is that it has a lot of avenues for different disciplines, for different fields to be connected. Say, biology and chemistry, they're connected through biochemistry. Biology and physics, they're connected through biophysics, and so on. And so it implies the importance of knowledge within and across curriculum areas, where subjects can grow through each other in increments of lessons, such as how mathematics can build upon science and technology topics, and vice versa. This may also explain why fields in science and technology were immediately connected to one another, in intervals of quarters, in contrast to the teaching of a whole branch of science in 1 year. During the secondary education curriculum or SEC in 2010, nag-continue yung paggamit ng scheme na first year high school is going to be science is going to be about integrated science, second year high school is going to be about biology, third year high school science is going to be about chemistry, and then fourth year high school science is going to be about physics. These years na nakalipas, ang ginawa natin is for one academic year, magkakasama na yung iba't ibang mga branches of science. Say, meron ng earth and space science na may kasamang chemistry, may kasamang physics, may kasamang biology, and only one academic year. And that is a challenge actually for a lot of science teachers who are so used to teaching, say, biology alone or physics alone, because now they need to be able to teach it multidisciplinarily. Ayan siya. Okay, so we proceed now with the following approaches. The approaches are what teachers and policymakers apply to science education to help students demonstrate scientific skills, understand and apply scientific knowledge, and demonstrate scientific attitudes and values, because these three right here are the main goals of science teaching in the Philippines. Specifically, learners must become creative and critical problem solvers. They must be responsible stewards of nature. They must be innovative and inventive thinkers. They must also become informed decision makers, and they must also be effective communicators. Now, in developing each science lesson, the goal must always be to promote scientific, technological, and environmental literacy to learners. Yung scientific, technological, and environmental literacy, that is the kind of literacy we as science teachers in the Philippines are trying to inculcate among our students. Now, all of those talks about science teaching, science education, okay, all of those talks, they're not going to be possible if not because of a learning plan. So what are the components of a learning plan? First is we begin with the objectives. They must be met over the week and they must be connected to the curriculum standards. Now, where do you find the curriculum standards? You'll be finding them in the curriculum guide, of course. Now, to meet the objectives, kailangan merong procedures na mapafollow. If needed, kailangan may additional lessons na naka-include din dyan. Exercises and remedial activities may be done for developing content knowledge and, competencies. Kailangan din may mga assessment tayo such as formative assessment strategies. Now, valuing objectives support the learning of content and competencies and enable learners to find significance and joy in learning the lessons. Some weekly objectives shall be derived from the curriculum guides. So yeah, this is a sample of the learning learning competency code that we have in junior high school. So say for Science 8, it's going to be abbreviated as S8. Tapos meron siyang Earth and Space, which is ES. There will be a dash to separate them from the next one, which is second quarter, Roman numeral. And then the week number, which is week 4, is going to be a letter. In this case, it is uppercase. And then there will be another dash to separate it from the number of the competency, which is competency number 19. So, ayun. It is actually written as part of the objective. The learning competency is written again as part of the objective. Next comes the content. For the content, it is going to be what the lesson is all about. It pertains to the subject matter that the teacher aims to teach. Say for instance, pwedeng ilagay dyan yung convergent plate boundaries, divergent plate boundaries, pwedeng ilagay dyan yung human respiratory system, or human circulatory system. In the curriculum guide, the content can be tackled in a week or perhaps 2. Yeah. Next one comes the learning resources. So for the learning resources, it is a list of materials to be used in different days. So there are different resources. Say for instance, pwedeng gamitin ng teacher's guide, pwedeng gamitin yung learner's module, pwedeng gumamit ng mga internet resources, pwedeng pagsama-samahin ng mga yan. Okay, so it is just, fine. Next one comes the procedures. For the procedures, these are steps to be completed across the week. So, kailangan ma-distribute yung mga activities properly para ma-help ang mga students to learn the lessons well. Teachers can get information on the effectiveness of the procedures by doing reflection. So, kailangan yung reflection is supposed to be filled up. Pero ang nangyayari usually is nakakalimutan ni teacher yun. But it is actually a very important part of the instructional process, reflecting on the instruction based from the formative assessment or based from the results of the summative assessment. Now, sustaining student learning systematically is done by providing students with multiple ways to learn new things, as it was said in the previous part of this video. And so, practice their learning, question their learning processes, and draw conclusions about what they learn in relation to their life experiences, because, science teaching must be contextualized, and even previous knowledge must be related to their new knowledge. Kailangan din may time allotment for each step. Kailangan if it's 60 minutes, yung isang araw, saktong 60 minutes yun. So the following steps are followed for the procedure. First is for the part of elicit. We have 7 E's in science. The first one is elicit. So kailangan magkaroon ng review of the previous lesson or the new lesson must be presented. Next is engage. Kailangan ma-establish yung purpose for the new lesson. Next part of engage is by presenting examples or instances of the new lesson. The next part is going to be explore. So allow the students to discuss new concepts and practice new skills. And, just join in the discussion or initiate the discussion if you may. Next one is explain. Develop mastery that is going to lead to formative assessment. So give them some practice stuff like board work or seat work, mga drills, yan, para mag-develop yung mastery nila. Next E is elaborate. So they need to find the practical applications of concepts and skills, and thus they would be able to elaborate about it. The next part of elaborate is making generalizations and abstractions about the lesson. Right after that comes evaluative learning. So in this part, usually nangyayari yung summative assessment. Okay, so yung mga graded na mga assessments usually nangyayari doon. And then right after that, you can provide them additional activities for application, or perhaps if they did not get it yet, they can do a remedial activity. Ayan. So next part is for the reflection. So in this portion of the lesson development, the teacher is allowed to assess their methods and approaches in going about the topics. Well, it is just common for a teacher to have difficulties in delivering the lesson, especially if it's the first time na delivering lesson na yan. But if it will not be natural if the teacher keeps on having difficulties in delivering lessons every time. So, kailangan magkaroon siya ng reflective process so that next time he or she would be able to do, better. In the span of a week, they need to reflect on which among their methods worked and what else can be done to help those students in need to cope up with the pressure of the instructional process. The following concepts and questions help teachers effectively reflect on their methods. First, pwedeng i-identify ni teacher yung number of learners na nag-earn ng 80% sa formative assessment. Kailangan niyang bilangin yun. Anyway, that is going to be simple kasi bibilangin lang naman niya yung mga scores na mababa and then just subtract it from the rest. Ayan. The next question, the next parameter is the number of learners who require some additional activities for remediation. So perhaps ito yung mga bumagsak based from the first parameter. Next one is asking oneself if the remedial lessons work. And if they did, the number of learners who have already caught up with the lesson. So hopefully by now, at this part, lahat ng mga estudyante nakapag-cope up na with the lesson. However, kung meron pa mga batang kailangan pa rin ng further remediation, kailangan din siya manote. Because there's another part at another field for number of learners who continue to require remediation. Now, after which, kailangan i-assess ni teacher kung ano sa mga strategies niya yung nag-work, and then perhaps maglagay din siya ng reason if possible kung paano nag-work yung mga at bakit. Now, pwede rin siya maglagay dito ng mga difficulties na na-encounter niya, which their supervisor, pwede ang coordinator, pwede rin yung head teacher, and their principal were able to help them solve. Now, lastly, in the name of, science, technology, and society, what innovations or localized materials was a teacher able to use to discover, which he or she wishes to share with other teachers. So, pwede niya rin ilagay dyan yung mga localized materials na ginamit niya. Ayan. So, the last part of this video is going to be about the instructional materials and resources. The first among them is going to be the following. So the following, let's just skip to that part because we all know how these resources are going to help. First is facilitate the teaching learning process. They supply a concrete basis for conceptual thinking. And next is they make learning more permanent, and they have a high degree of interest for the learner. Sustaining interest of learners is very important. Also, they can they can have a sense of developing a continuity. Okay, in case of motion pictures that is not easily obtained through any other materials. So, there are graphic materials such as the following. Okay, pwedeng itong mga examples na to. Say, pie charts, pwedeng mga simple charts yan. Then, these. Ayan, so, yan. Comic strips. Yan. So, pwede mga editorial cartoons, pwede yung mga flyers, pwede mga brochures, and those are all graphic materials. Yan, that is a chart. This one is a poster, and then a graph, another graph, and a map. That one also is going to help you out. And then flashcards, they may also help you out. Now, next one's three-dimensional materials. They are functioning just like graphic materials, pero they add a more manipulative element to the process. Say, for instance, this model, it's a muscled shoulder. Pwede rin mga rocks, pwede rin mga specimens. Kaso these samples are quite, since buong organism yan, it's quite creepy, especially for junior high schools. And then, pwede rin ang mga robots. Ayan. Also, dioramas. Pwede rin mga yan. Next are still pictures. Flat opaque pictures that are printed and are not projected. Yan, pwedeng gamitin yung mga yan. Still projected pictures naman, they are projected. So, ang pinagkaiba ng mga yan, yung kanina, is nahawakan lang sila. Ito namang mga to, nakaproject talaga sa screen. Next one, mga motion pictures, such as GIF or mga shorts. So, yeah, they provide an additional movement to, aside from just being stagnant, they provide additional movement and thus understanding of something that may be operational. Say, in this case, the movement of those balls. Next are audio materials, pwedeng mga discs, mga drives, na pwedeng magbigay ng auditory experience para sa mga bata. Newsletters, they can also be used. They are informal printed reports which is distributed to members of a particular group. In the Philippines, wala tayong ganong newsletter. Medyo rare lang sila. Meron tayo usually mga newspaper. Ayan. So, printed and reference materials, they can be reference books, they can be textbooks. Ayan. Display materials, these are engaging classroom decorations intended to inform students. Say, mga bulletin boards, their main purpose actually is to make the classroom look better, look nicer. But you can make these bulletin boards informative as well. So, yun. Some naman are also community resources. These are usually places na pwedeng puntahan ng mga bata so that they would be able to have immersive learning experiences, authentic learning experiences. So these places can be museums, pwede rin mga national parks, pwede rin actually yung mga malls. Ayun. So, yeah, this has been a very long video and it's about the teaching of science. I hope that you were able to get some insights, okay, about how to develop a science lesson and the different instructional resources and materials that you can use for science teaching. This is the Knowledge Catalog. It is a brand being developed by yours truly. I am a teacher creator. I am also a high school teacher in the Philippines, and I love developing these kinds of content that can help me and help my students. So I hope that you would show some support by subscribing to this channel, or perhaps leaving a like right there, or commenting something nice sa comment section. I'll see you in the next video.